You've probably been there. You ask Copilot for a PowerPoint deck and it can generate one in seconds, but it comes out generic with the wrong colors, wrong branding, and the most default template that you can think of. So you try to rebuild it by hand and waste even more time saving those unusable slides. But Copilot can now generate decks on brand and remove all that cleanup. And in this video, I will show you how to set it up, including the one step that decides whether your deck will land on brand or just almost right. But before getting into it, just watch this. This is the same prompt used twice. The only difference is a bit of setup that you only have to do once. Alright, so let me build one of these for you and show you. And for this example, I'm gonna pretend I'm working at Sony and I'm basically a product manager who lives in PowerPoint and has no time to fix 40 slides by hand. Now let me show you where this sits. Because this feature is a bit hidden, but the way to find it is once in PowerPoint, you can open the Copilot pane here on the bottom right, and in the box where you would normally type a prompt, you can see there's this little plus icon. And if you click it, one of the options that comes up is select brand. Now, one thing that you will need to be able to use any of these is a Copilot premium license, which typically is what your company probably has already given you. So going back to this, the first time you click select brand, likely you will see nothing there yet, just a single button that says create a new brand kit. And if you click it, it will take you over to the manage brand kit page, which is where you actually build the real kit. Now, once you're here, you can click on start a new kit and give it a name. In this case, for example, let's call it Sony brand kit. And this will open a new page where you can see all the different elements that you can tweak in the brand kit. For example, the logos, right? You can just click on here and upload from your device or from cloud files. You can also, for example, tweak the fonts, and there's a list of fonts that you can choose from, but you can also decide to upload your custom fonts. You can also, for example, select your color palette, right? And just pick any colors that fit your branding, and that's how you select them. Now, of course, you could do all of this manually, setting each element one by hand, but most likely your company already has some brand guidelines created in a PDF. And that's where this feature on top comes quite handy, because you can just click here where it says add brand guidelines and select the brand guidelines that your company already has provided. So for example, here I'm gonna upload the brand guidelines that I found online from Sony. And basically you can see that Copilot is thinking for a while, right? This process can take a bit, but actually it's using AI to go through the entire document and extract what is the logo, what are the fonts, what are the colors, and essentially it's already filling in all these fields for you automatically using AI to extract those elements from your real brand guidelines. Now, this process can take quite some time. You can see here Copilot thinking and extracting all those elements from the guidelines. So I'm going to accelerate this, but eventually what you see is that Copilot managed to extract from the guidelines your logos, your colors, the fonts, and the style. And for example, if I click on colors, you can see here the different color palette, right? So it has defined already that Sony black and also quite a colorful palette, which actually it's matching what the Sony brand guidelines say, because indeed Sony defines black as their main color, but it also has all these other colors that they use across their communication. So actually you can see how AI here did quite a pretty decent job in extracting all those elements already from the brand guidelines. Now, one step I recommend not skipping is clicking here where it says templates, because basically here you can add any branded PowerPoint slides that you already have that your company is always using. So this will ensure that Copilot not only follows your brand guidelines, but it also uses those templates that your company already has defined. And once again, here you can upload from your device directly. So here, for example, I'm gonna upload the corporate template of Sony that I found online. But if you don't have one, you can also click on designer and create your own, of course. And basically here, once you load the template, you can change the template name. You can also add some tags if you need to find them or you want to describe if they are for marketing or for engineering or for specific departments. And you can also add a small description, like in this case, for example, I'm gonna put this is the main template for Sony slides, and then you click on add to brand kit, and essentially this will take a bit to load, but now it's part of the Sony brand kit guidelines that I just created. And essentially once you have everything in, you can click on save assets, and this brand kit is already saved. Let me show you. Now here back in PowerPoint, I can open again Copilot and I will put the following prompt. Using the Q3 full year results, build a 12-slide leadership deck for a senior executive review. I'm also telling it which elements I want to cover in the slides, and I'm also adding some details like lead every slide with a takeaway as the title. So basically a sentence that states the point, not just a label. And I want to make sure that it's only one idea per slide with at most 4 supporting lines. I basically want to avoid to have a full wall of text in every slide and pull every number number straight from the document. And before prompting, what I'm going to do is click on the plus button, then I go again to select brand, and now you can see that the Sony brand kit shows in the list. So I can select it, and now that you can see that the kit has been selected, I send the prompt. Now this will take a while. Copilot is thinking it through for a bit, and it might be that on the way it will ask you a few questions, like for example here it's asking me if I want to use the visual style of the deck that I already have open or if I want to use the brand kit that I selected. So of course I want to showcase the brand kit, so I'm going to select use the brand kit, and then Copilot is thinking for a while and I'm going to accelerate all this part, but eventually after a while look at the document that it created because it's pretty impressive, especially if you think where Copilot was some time ago. I personally find it quite impressive. Already in the cover slide this looks very much like Sony, using that black background with some polished design elements that you would expect from Sony, like those lines on the top and the bottom. The Sony logo is clearly used on the bottom left, and as I go through the slides, honestly, this totally feels like a deck that Sony could use, right? So this is also, again, an example of a full black background with some design elements and the Sony logo. And if I go to the details where you have the actual data, in this case, you can see that it's using the exact colors from the color palette, right? So we have these blacks, but also these accents in blue. And honestly, this is looking pretty good. Like if I would find this online, I would totally believe that this is a real Sony deck. And if you think where Copilot was a few months ago and where Copilot is now with this feature, I mean, to me, it's night and day. Now, of course, some PowerPoint slides might still look completely on brand, but still, when you read into the details, it might still read as generic AI. But there's one step that you can take to ensure that that gap doesn't exist. Let me show you with another example. So, of course, many companies like Sony might be managing different brands. And to show you that step that you shouldn't miss, let's now create another brand kit, in this case for PlayStation. All right, so let's build a new brand kit, and this time I'm going to skip the manual stuff completely. So basically, I'm just going to drop the PlayStation brand guidelines that I found online straight into it and let AI extract all the details. And again, this takes a bit of time, so I'm accelerating it, but as you can see, now it's completed and it extracted the logos, the fonts, and also the colors, which you can see they are the distinct PlayStation colors. But as you can see, it did not extract the brand voice from the guidelines. And that's actually because this is not even specified in the guidelines document itself. But this is exactly the gap that I was talking about, because that Sony deck that we created a minute ago, it looks great, but if you actually read the words, they still sound like AI wrote them and not the typical way that Sony would actually speak internal. And this thing honestly is very easy to fix. You just want to open here where it says brand voice and you write in how, in this case, PlayStation actually sounds. So typically I like to keep it to just a few lines of plain English. In this case, for example, something like this: confident, direct, a little playful. We talk to players like people, not a corporation. Keep short, punchy sentences, and you need to be enthusiastic about games, never overhyped or salesy, no corporate jargon or stiff, use a formal tone. And then you can click on add brand voice and then save it. And this will take you a couple of minutes, but honestly, it's one of the most useful couple of minutes that you're going to use, because now this brand kit doesn't just know how PlayStation looks like, but it also knows how PlayStation talks to other people. And that's what makes a difference between a deck that sounds AI generic and a deck that really sounds on brand. All right, so now we have two brand kits, the Sony and the PlayStation 1. And for the demonstration before, I just came up with a prompt myself to put in Copilot to show you how the Sony brand kit works. But as you know, real work is typically much messier than that. So let me now show you what I would do as a real product manager working at Sony, which is building a deck from an already existing document using, again, the brand guidelines of PlayStation. Let me show you. All right, so in this case, instead of typing out to Copilot the content that I wanted to create, what I'm going to do is point Copilot to the actual brief document that I have sitting in a SharePoint and let it build from what's already in there. Let me show you how this works. So again, we open Copilot, and on the right side, we type using the PlayStation Novartis partnership brief, and I make sure to use the slash so I can indicate the exact document in the SharePoint that I should refer to. Build a 10-slide partnership proposal for an internal approval meeting. Now, I'm not going to read you the entire prompt. Essentially, I'm giving it some instructions into what else I want to include in the deck. So again, making sure that every slide title has a key takeaway and that there is only 1 point per slide. And once again, before submitting, I will go to select brand, and as you can see now, I can find here also the PlayStation brand kit. So let me select it and I'm going to send the prompt. Now, once again, this will take a while. I'm going to accelerate the process, but I want to stop for a moment here in this thought process, because look at these images that Copilot is creating. They totally look like they belong in the PlayStation wall with this very dark imagery, but a bit of dark blue glows. And of course, young people looking at the TV. It's pretty impressive that Copilot is actually generating these images without me telling it any guidance besides saying, hey, follow the PlayStation brand kit. So again, I'm going to accelerate accelerate this because I'm very curious about the final outcome. And as you can see now, Copilot created a deck that looks very different from the Sony one before, because I used, of course, a different brand kit, and this totally feels like a PlayStation deck. Like, just look at the cover slide, it's already using the PlayStation logo as it should. This background image is completely generated by Copilot, and it totally looks like a real PlayStation event, so it's quite crazy that I didn't have to tell it anything, it just created this by its own. And as I scroll down, everything here looks like it could belong to a real PlayStation presentation. Like, if I start looking at the background with these highlight glows in blue and the entire mood of the deck, and the fact that it's using these blue boxes in the exact color that's specified in the bright guidelines, I mean, it's quite impressive. Also, if I look at this slide, again, it generated some people looking at the TV with some blue glow on the face, which totally fits the brand image of PlayStation with a bit of a younger audience, and also the mood and the colors are totally PlayStation. So again, I'm quite impressed with what Copilot has done with very little input. It's just some brand guidelines that I found online. I'm not even sure they are the real ones, but just from that, it created a really nice document that totally looks like it could belong to the PlayStation wall. Now, there's one more thing I would like to show you, because it could also be that you already have a deck created and you want to make sure that it complies with your brand guidelines. And now, since you have brand kits, it's very easy to do so with just one simple prompt. Let me show you. Here, for example, you can see this slide deck that is very generic. And what I'm going to do is open Copilot and prompt, check this presentation against my brand. And I'm going to select the brand kit that I want to compare it against. In this case, for example, the PlayStation brand kit. And I'm going to send the prompt. This will take a while. Once again, it's thinking it through. But eventually, you can see that it came back with a full audit of the elements that it thinks are of brand. Like, for example, the colors or the font type and so on. So after this, what you can prompt is the following. Please apply all the fixes that you recommend. And this will take a while. Again, I'm going to accelerate it. And now you can see that Copilot already has done the updates to the slides. And you can see, for example, that it updated all the colors to those colors that we have seen before that they belong to the PlayStation brand kit. So again, that was just a couple of prompts, and essentially this is like having your brand manager in a box, because anytime you can just send this simple prompt and get a full audit on those elements that are of brand, and also you can ask Copilot to fix them automatically, so you don't have to be fixing manually every single slide. Alright, so you have a slide deck perfectly on brand, but whether it's a good presentation, that's a different question, because many of these Copilot decks, to be honest, are a bit of a mess. They have too many slides and they lack a clear storyline. So if you want to make sure that your deck is as good as it looks, watch this video over here. I'll see you over there. Bye.